You are born in a private clinic on the outskirts of Geneva, not a hospital, a clinic. There is a difference, and your father understood it before you took your first breath. Hospitals have records that journalists can file requests for. Clinics owned by a holding company registered in Liechtenstein have nothing that anyone can find. The obstetrician who delivers you is paid 180,000 euros for the procedure and for something more important than the procedure, her silence. The 3 nurses on duty that night have each signed non-disclosure agreements so layered with legal consequence that even mentioning the city where they worked would constitute a breach. The room smells of fresh flowers and something antiseptic and very expensive. Your father stands at the window looking out at Lake Geneva, and when the doctor says it's a girl, he doesn't turn around immediately. He takes a breath, then he turns. And for a man who controls more wealth than the GDP of most countries, the expression on his face is something that no amount of money can manufacture. He is simply undone. You did not exist, not officially, not yet. Your birth certificate is filed under a name that is not your name, in a jurisdiction that does not share records with any other government on Earth. Your father has employed 4 attorneys across 3 continents to construct the legal architecture of your invisibility. It took them 11 months. They began before you were born, before your mother had told anyone at all. Your childhood unfolds inside a 340-acre estate in the Swiss countryside, 40 minutes from Zurich. On paper, the property belongs to a real estate trust registered in the Cayman Islands, which is owned by a holding company in Luxembourg, which is itself a subsidiary of a foundation in Liechtenstein whose beneficiaries are described only as designated family members. Your father's name appears nowhere, not on a single document. The estate costs $94 million. There is a lake on the property. Your father had it deepened. The house has 23 rooms, 6 of them you are never allowed to enter. Not because they are dangerous, because they contain things that cannot be explained to a child. Phone lines that connect directly to government officials on 4 continents, filing systems that hold 40 years of arrangements, rooms where men and women arrive before dawn and leave without eating breakfast and never come back twice. You have a swing set made of hand-carved Swiss pine. You have 3 horses, each with a dedicated groom who was background checked to a level of scrutiny that would qualify them for intelligence work. You have a governess from Edinburgh who holds a doctorate in developmental psychology and earns 220,000 euros a year and has never told a single person what family she works for. You have everything, except a name the world knows. Your education is assembled like a private museum, a mathematics tutor from MIT, a literature professor from Oxford who flies in every Tuesday and Thursday, an economics scholar from the London School of Economics who begins your financial education when you are 9 years old, starting not with arithmetic, but with the question your father has already decided is the most important one you will ever learn to answer. Where does wealth come from? And where does it go when no one is looking? You ask your governess early, maybe 6 years old. Why don't we go to the supermarket like the people in books? She places down her pen with the measured patience of someone who has been briefed on exactly this question. Your family, she says, prefers privacy. You accept this because you are 6, and because the estate has a swimming pool, and because you have not yet learned that privacy and freedom are not the same thing. At 8, you begin to understand the shape of something larger. Your father brings you into the study one afternoon. He sits across from you at a desk the size of a small boat, and he speaks to you the way adults speak to other adults, which will later strike you as both a gift and a kind of theft. He explains that the family controls assets across 41 countries, sovereign wealth structures, private equity holdings, generational trusts established in the 1960s that have been compounding without interruption for 60 years. He does not give you a number. He gives you something more disorienting than a number. He draws a circle on a piece of paper and says, "The world knows this much." Then he draws a second circle around the first one 3 times larger. He says, "We live here, in the part the world cannot see." You stare at the circles for a long time. Your mother is a woman of extraordinary grace and almost architectural composure. She was raised in old Milanese money, the kind of family that owns paintings rather than buying them, that attends galas rather than funding them. She met your father at 27 through an introduction arranged between 2 people who understood that certain unions are less about romance and more about the consolidation of legacy. She is not cold. She loves you with a ferocity that sometimes surfaces as strictness, but there is a quality to her love that you will only understand much later. It is the love of a woman who made a choice so total and so irrevocable that she has spent 20 years making peace with it one morning at a time. She reads to you in Italian and French. She teaches you the names of painters before she teaches you the names of politicians. She takes you to private viewings of museums closed to the public, rooms of art that the world lines up for hours to see, and you walk through them in silence with a curator who speaks to your mother like a man addressing a head of state, because in certain circles she is. What she never teaches you, but what you absorb through the walls of the estate and the texture of her silences, is this. There are women in your world who know everything and say nothing, and the knowing and the nothing are both forms of power and both forms of loss. At 10, you meet the family's principal advisor. He has been with your father for 28 years. He is the kind of man who wears the same style of suit every day without variation, who speaks in complete paragraphs, who has argued before international arbitration panels and once prevented a regulatory investigation across 2 jurisdictions that would have destabilized everything by making a single phone call to a single person at the right moment. Your father trusts him more than he trusts most of his own blood. He explains the structure to you over several afternoons, not because you need to know yet, because your father has decided that the worst thing that can happen to a person of your position is to be surprised by reality after they've already arrived in the world. The family's holdings, he explains, are not held by the family. They are held by a series of trusts, foundations, and private investment vehicles so carefully layered that even the people who manage individual pieces of the structure don't know how the pieces connect. A private bank in Zurich manages a portion. A family office in Singapore manages another. 3 separate law firms across London, Luxembourg, and the Cayman Islands each hold partial information. No single person outside of your father and the advisor has ever seen the full architecture, including your mother. The total, he tells you one afternoon, looking out the window at the lake, is difficult to calculate because so much of it is held in assets rather than currency. Real estate across 4 continents. Art portfolios that haven't been appraised in a decade because an appraisal would require disclosure. Private company stakes held through nominee structures, a collection of rare earth mineral rights in 3 countries that haven't been developed because developing them would require the family to surface in a way they have chosen not to. He looks at you carefully. What you will inherit is not money, it is a system. Learning to inhabit that system without being consumed by it is the only education that actually matters. At 12, your world expands to a radius of roughly 4 countries, Switzerland, Italy, a private island in the Aegean your family has owned since 1971, and once, memorably, New York, where your father has a penthouse in a building that lists a Delaware LLC as its registered owner. The penthouse is 7,400 square feet and occupies the top 2 floors. The building's lobby staff have been instructed never to acknowledge any resident by name. You spend 3 weeks there and see the city only through glass, through car windows with tinted panels, through the controlled aperture of a life arranged for absolute discretion. It is in New York that you first encounter something that will take years to name. You are 12 years old and you press your face to the window of the armored car and you watch a girl approximately your age cross the street below carrying a backpack, walking alone, looking at nothing in particular, going somewhere ordinary. And you feel something that is not quite envy and not quite grief, but lives in the neighborhood of both. She has no idea where she is going, and she doesn't need to. She is simply going. And the casual freedom of that motion, the absolute absence of surveillance and arrangement and protocol, strikes you with a force that the Swiss countryside, the horses, the Oxford literature professor, and the private Aegean island has never quite managed to fill. Your adolescence is an education in performance. You are schooled in how the world works without being allowed to exist inside it. Your economics education deepens. By 14, you can read a balance sheet across 3 currencies and explain the difference between a family office and a family foundation, and why the distinction matters enormously when governments begin asking questions. By 15, you have sat in on 4 meetings between your father and advisors discussing succession structures, inheritance mechanisms, and the specific question of how to move generational wealth from one heir to the next in a world increasingly interested in where dynastic money comes from. You sit in the corner and you say nothing, and the men in the room speak freely because they have been told to treat you as furniture and also as the future. You begin to understand the weight of what you are, not a person exactly, a vessel, a structural necessity, a continuation. The night before your 16th birthday, your father sits with you on the terrace overlooking the lake. He has aged in a way that wealth cannot arrest. His hair is silver now. He moves with the deliberateness of a man who has spent 4 decades never making an unconsidered gesture. He speaks quietly, and what he says is not a speech. It is closer to a confession. He tells you that he has made you invisible because visibility in this world is not safety. It is a target. He names 3 families he has known personally whose heirs became public. 2 were subjected to kidnapping attempts. 1 succeeded. He says this not to frighten you, but because you are 16 and old enough for the real calculation. The privacy, he says, was never about him. It was always about you. You look at him across the terrace and you believe him, and you also understand with a clarity that feels like growing up in real time that both things can be true at once. The protection was real, and it was also a cage, and he built both with the same hands. At 18, the structure shifts. This is the year that was always coming, the year the advisor has been preparing you for, the year the legal architecture of your invisibility begins its deliberate, controlled dismantling. Not exposure, nothing so crude. Emergence, managed, sequenced, advised emergence. You are introduced to the world through what the advisor calls a soft surface, a charitable foundation bearing a family name adjacent to but not identical to your actual surname, a seat on its board. Your first photograph in a publication your father's communications team has approved. You are described as a philanthropist. You are 18 years old and you have not yet been to a grocery store without a security detail. You attend a private university under an arrangement so carefully constructed that even the institution's president knows only what he has been permitted to know. Your fellow students see a quiet, composed young woman with an unusual fluency in economic theory and a habit of asking questions that seem to come from somewhere further along in the conversation than anyone else has reached. You are friendly. You are curious. You are completely, comprehensively unreachable. Not because you are cold, because the distance is structural. Because 18 years of not existing has left you unsure in the most fundamental way of who exists when you finally do. You meet people your age and the contrast is a physical sensation. They speak about their mableys with a looseness that astonishes you. They complain about their parents on their phones while walking across public plazas. They post photographs of their meals and their moods and their ordinary horizontal, unguarded lives. They are, in a word that feels both simple and devastating, legible. The world can read them. They have allowed the world to read them. It has never occurred to them that this is a choice. You watch them and you understand, for the first time with full adult weight, what was given and what was taken in those 18 years on the estate. You were given safety. You were given education. You were given resources so vast they have no practical upper limit. And you were not given the one thing that cannot be purchased or structured or arranged by 11 attorneys across 3 continents, the experience of being known, simply ordinarily known, by someone who chose you not because of what you represent, but because of who you are when no protocol is in place. The advisor visits you at the university once a semester. He is older now. His movements are slower. Over tea in your apartment, which has security features that cost more than most of your classmates' parents earn in 5 years, he speaks with a candor he has earned through decades of arrangement and consequence. I have spent 30 years building structures for your family, he says. Structures that will outlast me, that will outlast your father, that are designed to outlast everything except the family itself. He sets down his cup. The question I never asked, the one your father never asked either, is whether the person at the center of the structure wanted to be inside it. He looks at you. I'm asking now. You don't answer immediately, because the answer is not simple and you have been trained by 18 years of extraordinary education never to give an answer that is not accurate. What you know is this: the wealth is real, the system is real, the safety it provided was real, and the cost it extracted was also real. You are 18 years old and you have never taken a train alone, and you have never been to a grocery store without a briefing, and you have never had a conversation where the other person did not know on some level what your presence in the room meant. You know that within the decade, the advisor's projections suggest the family holdings will cross a threshold that does not yet have a common name. That the structure you have been educated to inhabit is not a fortune, but a force. The kind of force that shapes markets without appearing in them, that moves through governments without being registered by them, that will, if the structures hold, compound across another generation and then another, until the word billion becomes a rounding error. You know that you are the designated continuation of all of it, and you sit in your apartment above the university courtyard, listening to students below laugh about something ordinary, and you feel the full weight of an inheritance that no one can appraise in a life that no one fully knows, wearing the face of a person the world is only just beginning to see. And the question the advisor asks sits in the room with you like a third presence. Did you want this? You look out the window. You watch a girl cross the courtyard alone.